Welcome to For You Radio, where the gospel's for the believer and the unbeliever alike. That's you, me, and everybody. I'm Craig Donofrio, pastor of St. James Lutheran Church in the old Brooklyn neighborhood of Cleveland, Ohio. Who are you?
Indeed, you are.
Yes.
And I am Troy Neujahr, pastor of St. Peter's Lutheran Church, Shaker Heights, Ohio.
I like that little ending there. We are happy to be a ministry of both our churches, St. James and St. Peter's. If you happen to be anywhere near Old Brooklyn, come visit us at St. James. And if you're over near Shaker Heights, Troy would be happy to see you over at St. Peter's.
Sure.
I believe he would.
Yeah, for the most part.
We were just talking about how I have a sticker on my notebook computer that says, "Please disturb the pastor. You can ask me." And, of course, that is the sign of my being an extrovert, whereas Troy wants a sticker that just says, no.
No.
Just no. We're also a podcast and broadcast of 1517.org podcast network, Me Talk English. Go to 1517.org. Check out all the great resources there for you, for your church. All sorts of books and classes and videos and podcasts. And boy, if you spend enough time there, you will have time for nothing else in your life because there's that much there.
Wow.
So
is that a recommendation?
Depending. I mean, if you're utterly addicted to podcasts and stuff like that.
Okay. All right.
You could do worse.
Oh, very cool.
You could do much worse than 1517.org.
Yeah, indeed.
Troy, if people wanted to email us, what email address would they use?
Well, foryouradio at 1517.org.
That would be right.
That's the one. Yes, that's the one. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I got to say, I'm coveting your cutlass here.
I have a cutlass.
Yeah, I want to be a pirate now. Just arr. Can I do the rest of the show in pirate?
I believe so.
Arr.
That would be good. We'll get you an eye patch. Of course, if you poke your eye out with that thing, then you'll need one.
I'd be needing an eye patch.
Grr. So we are continuing on with the 10 Commandments. We have gone through 1 through 8 so far, which leaves us 9 and 10. That makes sense. It follows mathematically.
You know, by the way, I was attempting to do a segue there by coveting your cutlass here.
Yes. And that's what we're getting into.
You didn't really catch up on that, though.
Not so much.
So
okay. The 9th commandment is, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. And then the 10th commandment is, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor maidservant, nor his cattle, nor anything that is his, including his cutlass.
Oh, right. Anything else that belongs to your neighbor. You're correct.
Right. Yes.
All right. So what is it about this cutlass that makes me want to covet it so much then?
It's fun.
It's fun.
That's what it is. Yes. Okay. You need more fun in your life.
Probably.
So why are these 2 commandments broken up into 2 commandments? Once again, we talk about how some traditions, for lack of a better phrase, tie together what we say are the first 2 commandments, or I'm sorry, what they say is the first 2 commandments, we combine into one. You shall have no other gods before me, and they have, you shall have no other gods before me, and you shall make no graven images and worship them. We say, yes, if you have no other gods, you're not going to make something and worship it. Duh. And then we have these 2 covetings at the end, whereas our Calvinist friends and those of that kind of tradition, well, they have the 9th and 10th rolled into 1 commandment because it's all coveting. So why do we have it in 2?
Because we're right. I mean, no, sorry, that's too easy. You know what? I'm actually looking at English and side by side with the Hebrew here right now.
Yes.
And, you know, frankly, here's Exodus chapter 20, verse 17. Just 17, sorry.
Okay.
Verse 17. You shall not covet your neighbor's house, semicolon, rather. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife or his male servant or his female servant or his ox or his donkey or anything else that is your neighbor's. In other words, just what you read. And the Hebrew plays out very much like that. Actually, commandments beginning with you shall not murder, they all start with you shall not.
Right.
And so you shall not covet neighbor's house. The English plays out just exactly like the Hebrew. There's another command there, you shall not do this as well.
Okay, so that's from the 5th commandment forward, right?
Yeah.
So the Hebrew plays out in this way where
Yes.
you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not
Right.
steal, you shall not bear false witness. So because both of these start with a you shall not, we say, well, there's the delineation, there's the marker right
It
there.
sure reads like
Right.
2 commandments.
Okay.
Yes.
So
And then also too, the way the 10th is all kind of rolled into one, wife nor servant nor ox nor donkey, anything else. That's exactly the way it is in Hebrew as well too. There's not you shall not covet your wife, or you shall not covet your neighbor's manservant. It's just one that's all rolled together. I hope I've made that really confusing now.
well, it,
You know what,
it is
just,
a little confusing because honestly, the 9th commandment seems to be you shall not covet your neighbor's house, and the 10th commandment seems to be you shall not covet anything that can go into your neighbor's house also.
Yeah,
right?
my point is that's precisely the way it's written, though.
Right.
That's not an artificial delineation. It's that. Tell you what, if you want a real solid answer on this, why don't you send us an email, and Craig and I will put up a nice 15-minute video on YouTube showing the Hebrew grammar and the breakdown of it and everything else like that, with charts and everything.
What is this Craig and I stuff? If you're offering to do this, this is on you.
You and me, brother. Come on.
So
So
regardless, coveting is the topic du jour.
there we go.
Right?
And I was going to say more important than, is it 9th, 10th, 9th, and or 10th?
Right.
More important than that question is, what is coveting?
Yes. So let's ask that question. What is coveting? Coveting is desiring to have that which rightly belongs to your neighbor for yourself.
Okay.
How's that?
Yeah.
Did I miss anything there?
Can I offer my definition as well, too?
Please do.
So, you, dear listener, just be aware that Pastor Donofrio and I are going to be working from 2 separate definitions of coveting. So if we're going to sound like we might not be talking about the same thing sometimes. So here's the way I define coveting, is that desiring something that your neighbor has to the point where you're no longer satisfied with your own.
Okay, I can go with that.
Or rather, desiring what God has given your neighbor to the point where you're no longer satisfied with the gifts God has given you.
So in a sense, much like the 7th commandment, you shall not steal, you shall not steal even in your heart. You shall not desire to steal is part of how we understand that. Much like that, coveting, if you are not coveting, you have the gift of contentment with being happy with what you have, right?
We would both agree on that completely, yes.
And so if your neighbor has a bunch of stuff that you don't have, you should be able to say, well, good for that person. Good on them. You know, that's really awesome that they can afford those things or that they choose to use their wealth for such things. Good on them.
Again, I would say that you can walk away with a glad heart saying, thank you, Lord, for what you have given my neighbor.
Right.
Yeah, you have blessed them wonderfully.
Now, I don't know if it's really coveting, probably more of an 8th commandment problem with not bearing false witness, assuming the best of your neighbor at all times. If your neighbor has this ridiculously expensive car that could feed an entire nation for like 3 weeks, and you look at him and you say, really? Is that really the wisest way to use your money? Is that coveting, or is that just saying,
oh, okay,
I don't get it, right?
Well, do you want that car?
Not really.
Are you upset that he has that car and you have an old, what do you drive again?
2013 Kia.
So is he upset? Are you upset that your neighbor has that amazing car and you drive a 2013 Kia?
No, not really.
Okay.
I mean, I'd like to upgrade my Kia someday, but it's
Okay.
running fine for now.
Sort of.
Yeah.
When it starts. Yeah.
When it starts,
Yeah.
I gotta get that
For,
started
it works
first.
through most of the winter.
It's got the push button transmission, and honestly, folks, I've got to push it sometimes 10, 15 times before it finally catches. And it's kind of crazy, but otherwise it's a great car.
Yeah. As a person who's driven like the Fred Flintstone cars where you stop by putting your feet through the hole in the floor.
Right. I've got really nothing to complain about. I just spend an extra 5 minutes in the garage trying to get out. That's about it.
So with what you're talking about though, I'm going to say that no, that's not coveting.
Okay.
Other things that aren't coveting. How about admiring your neighbor's stuff?
Right.
So, again, we'll go back to your neighbor who has a really super awesome car. Hypothetically, I guess. I don't know. Your neighbor doesn't seem to have a super awesome car, but so it's okay, right? But so your hypothetical neighbor with the super awesome car, and you go, "That's a really nice car."
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Is that coveting?
Okay, so Dennis across the street has a Toyota Avalon hybrid, and he gets really, really good mileage, like 40 miles a gallon. And I look at that, and I'm like, I should get something like that. That would be great to get 40 miles a gallon. I don't necessarily want to take his away from him, and I don't think that he doesn't deserve it. I just see it, and I think, wow, that'd be cool to have something like that, right?
Well, and with that, you could also justify, not even justify, but there's a clear rationale for saying, I think I should improve my gas mileage.
Well, yeah.
My money would go further. It's not going to burn as much fuel, such and so forth. I think that seems like a wise decision to have.
And it's just a pain in the rump to go to the gas station that often, right?
Again, not coveting, right?
Right.
So let's say you like his car so much, like, that's so nice, I'm going to get one in the same exact color.
Right.
Now, however, let's say...
could be a little creepy and stalkery if you kind of do that, but whatever.
Okay. But what if you see that same car and say, oh, he's got the 2019 model. I'm going to go buy the 2024 model with the better package. Then I'm going to invite him over to look at mine.
Well,
and then you're comparing.
My take on that is you're an idiot because you shouldn't eat the depreciation. You should always buy a used car. But that's just my take.
My point is, though, so you could have a scenario where in one instance it's not coveting, and the other one you're clearly trying to one up.
Right.
And that devolves into coveting.
Okay, so this competitiveness about these things.
I think that's part of it.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The desire, the competitiveness. Even in that particular case, what you're trying to do is make your neighbor envious of you, so he's dissatisfied with his own stuff.
Ooh.
And there's that there too, right?
Yeah.
So the person who's content with their own stuff, again, can rightly give God praise for what he has given our neighbor.
Right. So I like my Kia. It's a comfortable car.
Yeah, I enjoy sitting in it.
And I'm happy for my neighbor with his car too.
Okay.
If I could choose any car in the world, would I choose his? No, not really. But it is cool, and I wouldn't mind having one like it. But that's not at the top of my list.
That's a different thing. So with all this, then, so it's not wrong to desire something better than what you have.
Right.
It's not wrong to actually improve the things you have. It's not wrong to ask God to give you the things that you don't have either. None of that's really wrong. I think this coveting is probably an internal line that you cross at some point.
Right. Okay, so the fifth commandment has an outward manifestation. You kill someone. The sixth commandment has an outward manifestation. You sleep with someone. The seventh commandment has an outward manifestation. You take someone's stuff. Eighth commandment, you gossip or speak ill of people.
Mm-hmm.
But ninth and 10th commandment, these are kind of an inward, kind of internal thing.
If I was to say anything, I would probably like to focus upon that aspect. Now, it's interesting, because we're Lutherans, so we read Luther's, writings and stuff like that. In his large catechism, he does kind of go off into this side field where now you're scheming to get things, that you're trying to appear good and right, but you're actually scheming to get these other things. And that's okay, but I think he already kind of covered that under "Thou shalt not steal."
Right.
So, you're right. This is the commandment where it boils down to. This is an inner, completely inward thing. Am I glad with what God has given me or not?
So this is the guy who is speaking to his friend's beautiful wife and saying things like, he doesn't understand you like I do.
Right.
You shouldn't put up with his mouth like that. That's just not right. I would never. I would never do that to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And partly because you think that this woman's so attractive or something about her, right? And so you're trying to scheme to get her away from her husband so you can have her for yourself. In the days that this was written, servant, maidservant, these were slaves. These were not employees.
Oh, sure.
Right? So in a like way, you're trying to seduce these people away so that they might actually serve their master poorly. And then you can say, well, I'll give you $5 for that person or whatever,
Sure. Right. Exactly. Somehow kind of trying to surreptitiously, but still on the surface legitimately get them away
Right.
from their.
So in the
master/employer.
seventh commandment, it also talks about getting things in a way that seems right. And we talked about how you can legally take people's stuff in an immoral way. Maybe the laws are skewed in such a way that you can actually take people's stuff, even though it's not a moral way, it's legal. And so likewise with this, right? Okay.
Yes, exactly. So that's part of it. And I think, again, if we kind of boil that down to your definition and my definition, if you are scheming to get those things or those people, it is because you are no longer satisfied with the gifts God has given you.
Right.
You think that that's a much better gift. That there's something that you gave them, God, that you did not give me, and I want it. Ooh, I just thought of that. Well, if God has given my neighbor such a thing, and he's not given me that, and I declare, God, you should have given that to me, I'm kind of overruling God's own gracious gifting and his choices and stuff like that. And I'm saying, no, Lord, you clearly made a mistake.
The grass is always greener on the other side, right?
Sure, yeah.
Little do you know.
The chickens always lay more eggs in the other coop.
Is that true?
No.
You got chickens. I don't.
Yeah, I know. I just wanted to bring that up because we're chickens, right? Yeah. So
you still got to mow the lawn on either side of the fence. It's the grass may be greener, you still got to mow it regardless, right? So there's, even though something looks like it might be better, is it really? And I don't know. That's a good question.
Well, and what if it is? What if it is better? What if it's genuinely better than what you have?
Yeah, could be.
My point is, I don't care. Can you be satisfied with what God has given you anyway?
No, good for my neighbor who has the newer model or the better version, or
Sure, there we go.
or whatever, right?
Yeah, praise to you, O Lord, for what you have given my neighbor.
Isn't it
praise to you for what you've given me. So go
right?
ahead. Yeah.
Isn't it interesting? We can look at our neighbor and say, "Oh man, that person's got it all," and there are people looking at me saying, "Oh man, that guy's got it all," right? I mean, you can be anywhere in the economic spectrum, and this is going to hit you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. In part of our pre-recording conversation, we went a slightly different direction. And do you want to entertain that a little bit now? So these commandments definitely have like a physical aspect of what God has given in terms of a house or wife or servants and cattle and have you. But what about like the gifts God has given other people?
Oh, yeah.
Those are all gifts, but what am I trying to say? The mental gifts, the aptitudes that he's given other people.
Yeah. There was a guy when I was in college. His name is Jason. Blonde hair, just chiseled features. Kind of guy you really wanted to hate. Really good scholar, really good athlete. And you're like, I want to hate this guy. But he's so nice. You couldn't hate him. No matter how much you wanted to. You couldn't. You look at someone like this and you say, man, here I am, a fat slob who's getting C's, and you look at this guy and you're like, dude, that guy's insanely got it all together. And, it's hard to not want to hate the guy for having the gifts that God has given him. Right.
And that's very interesting the way you would put that, because that's precisely what we do is we look for some sort of chink in the armor.
Right.
We look for something where we can take them down a peg and make them lesser in our eyes.
Yeah.
So we don't feel inferior.
He has webbed toes, right? I mean, that's
yeah. I hear he snores, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But with that, or what if we turn to the Lord and say, Lord, how come you haven't made me more outgoing? How come you haven't made me smarter?
Right.
How come you haven't made me more physical or whatever? Is that part of coveting too?
Well, yes. Yeah, it is. It is. You're comparing yourself to someone else instead of recognizing that God has given me unique gifts that maybe other people look at me and go, hey, you know what? I wish I could do what that guy does. I wish I could speak like him. I wish I knew what all those buttons on the mixing board over there do, or whatever. My answer is, well, apply yourself a little bit and you'll be just fine. But it is one of those things where we have gifts and aptitudes, and we shouldn't resent each other for them, but we should celebrate each other for them. And thank God that God has given my friend this wonderful gift. You think about Moses, and God says, Moses, go lead my people out of the land of Egypt. And Moses is like, I'm a stuttering fool.
Yeah.
I can't go tell Pharaoh to let my people go. I'll trip all over. I'll make an idiot out of myself. There's no way, right? And God says, okay, fine. I'll give you someone who will help. He'll be your voice for you. We need each other. We need each other's gifts.
You know what's fascinating with that particular story, though, because the Lord does give then Aaron and his sister Miriam, right? Yeah, to Moses as these assistants. And there is a point in history where they then they kind of undercut Moses' leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like, hey, we've been here all along. We need as much honor and authority and respect as you have. We're equal to you in every way. And the Lord's answer is, no, because I called Moses to this.
Right.
I gave him that task, not you. And that plays out very dramatically right there, that they coveted something that God had given Moses, and in the end became dissatisfied with their own positions.
And that happens, right? And that's part of us being sinners, is we're discontented with our position.
Yeah.
You know, and Aaron, someone of great authority among the tribes, you know, people looked up to this guy.
He's the high priest.
But it wasn't enough, right?
Yeah.
So when is enough enough? And that's a good question, because sometimes with some people, there never is enough. This side of the grave.
So godliness with contentment is great gain.
Yeah.
St. Paul says. And again, I think it's probably worth reminding ourselves that, desiring perhaps more of something is not necessarily coveting.
Right.
Desiring better of something is not necessarily coveting. But there is an inward line that can be crossed, I think, fairly easily and perhaps more often than we know.
Yeah. Definitely. If you're hearing some noises in the background, it's the beagle.
I was going to say, it sounds like your stomach growling.
He's very vocal today.
Yeah.
And I don't know why he's in here with us making all this noise, but he is.
So I'm very glad God has given you 2 dogs, and I'm still content with my one.
I'm coveting one right now instead of having 2. But regardless, we've taken on this responsibility, and so they're a gift, right?
There you go. Yeah.
There you are. So,
what else can we say here? What else must we say here?
What about an outward manifestation of this sort of thing? I think that this overlaps into the 7th commandment, the 8th commandment. Of course, we're talking about that. I can't help but to think with hanging out with Dr. Rod Rosenblatt as long as I did with all of the guys who were also followers, we really learned to celebrate each other's benefits a lot. Good on you is a very common phrase. And I'm very thankful for the mature Christian fathers in my life who have given me a perspective to be able to say, hey, good on you. You know, you're able to do this one thing. Good on you. And to not focus on me. But sometimes we need these things to be modeled for us. Mm-hmm. And so that's something that hopefully pastors will learn to do, is to celebrate each other's accomplishments and each other's ability and that sort of thing.
You know, that is really good. I'm glad you brought that up, because that idea of very commonly happens otherwise, that sort of subtle competition that happens.
Yeah.
Oh, sure, yeah, you're pretty smart in that area, but did you know about this? And again, try to make another person lesser so you can become greater.
Yeah.
Rather than just simply being able to say, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Praise God for what he's given you.
Yeah, I think
and I benefit from that, right?
So many of my friends who have gone on for PhDs from schools like Oxford University, I mean, really, really prestigious kind of degrees. And here I am with an MDiv, and I don't feel inferior. I just feel other. You know, God has gifted me with the ability to be a pastor. He's gifted them with professorships and that sort of thing. And whereas I do enjoy academics, I haven't made that my whole life like they have. And so we all have our blessings in this world.
Yeah.
And it's good.
So, yeah, there's, so what we've got so far is we've talked about coveting, talked about contentment, we've talked about competition, And we've talked about just being complementary to one another, right?
Yeah.
That that all is going to fold into these two commandments. To where can we, once again, I'm going to hammer this home. Can we truly rejoice in what our neighbor's been given? Can we truly, your microphone's not on.
No,
Can
it's
we,
not.
can we truly rejoice in what our neighbor's been given? Can we truly praise God for what he's given them and still be perfectly content with what he's given us? Can we remain thankful for our own gifts in the face of seeing someone else having different, or dare you even say better gifts?
Yeah.
And if we can do all that, I think we're keeping this commandment. But if nothing else, Luther does kind of close out these commandments by saying, this commandment is there, if for no other reason than to prove you can't be perfect. Because, sure, maybe you didn't kill anybody, but, you've coveted.
Right.
Yeah.
And after everything's said and done, the whole of the law is there to show us we need a Savior. And the good news is you have a Savior who has forgiven you all these sins and more, and even the sin of having a whiny beagle in the studio. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you in his grace. Go check out 1517.org. For You Radio is a 1517.org production. To listen to this radio broadcast and broadcasts like this one, I invite you to visit 1517.org. There you will also find many publications and free resources, including classes on Christian apologetics, church history, philosophy, and so much more. We are completely funded by generous donors like you. Would you consider making a generous gift to our work of spreading the gospel? Simply visit 1517.org.